remember that time that we went out on your boat? You brought the little brown with, and you brought that brown with. Ladies, that's why men are never to be left unsupervised. Well, I saw Bill yesterday, and he said to tell you hi. So he misses you, so he thinks about you. They had some questions about concrete, so I went over there to their house yesterday, and they want to put some concrete from the garage over to a new deck that they had built. And they had it built out of that, like, Trex material. And I said, well, I heard that stuff lasts 30 years. And Bill and Linda said, well, we're in our mid-70s. This weekend, Clay came by the house, and he had a tire going flat. He said, Dad, can you get the screw out of the tire? So I got a tire patcher kit. I did the dad thing, pulling the screw out. And I said, well, let me show you the progress that we're making on our patio. Because our house is kind of on a hill, and there's no flat place to eat. And so for years, Tammy and I have sat out in the driveway with a card table. No telling what the neighbors think when they go by. So last Christmas, quarter-footer. Back in May, my buddy Frank came. We laid a retaining wall. Recently, I had about 20 tons of stone, give or take, dumped in there. Well, last week, I'm doing a job for Jacob, right down the street from us. So I said, the ready-mix truck can come back to our house and wash out. So whatever was left in the drum, he dumped out. We washed out there. So I'm showing Clay. Of course, you know, Clay's an engineer. And I said, well, I'm about 6 tons of gravel short. He says, Dad, don't you think you should break up that concrete before you put more gravel on it? I said, well, it's not going to settle the same, Dad. I said, Clay, it won't make any difference in my lifetime. One more idea about this lifetime. So, I know that this notebook would mean nothing to anyone in the room. And in fact, if you were to buy this at like Walmart or Dollar General, you'd probably pay about 50 cents for a notebook like this. I paid €5 for it. One of the best blessings we ever had was going to Europe last year. And we went to Spain, and everyone was on siesta. But of course, if you're someone who wants to go to bookstores, that won't stop you, right? So we found a little bookstore, and Tammy got a couple of like Harry Potter books in Spanish for the grandkids, which we probably never read. And of course, if you're an aspiring writer, you always want more notebooks. So I found this, and it even says made in Spain on the back. You know, I realized something this week. I have more backpacks, I know. You know that addiction I have. The corollary one is I have a lot of notebooks. And I love moleskin. If you like to write with pencil by hand, you cannot beat the sensory delight of writing in moleskin. I don't understand what the difference is, but it's not like regular paper. I share all that to say I looked in my office this week, and I've looked at the notebooks that I've filled, because I handwrite my sermons, and my newspaper articles and stuff like that, and then I type it out. I looked at the notebooks that I filled, and I looked at my stack of unwritten notebooks, and you know what I realized? I'm never going to live long enough to use those notebooks. And some notebooks, it feels so special, I don't want to write in it yet. That's a long way of saying, unfortunately, Congress doesn't have term limits, but you do. And this life is short, and you're like, wow, way to bring it down, Craig. Where's the motivation? Where's the encouragement in the fact that life is short? Time passes. You cannot reclaim the time. I might be wasting your time right now, and you're never going to get it back. You're like, wow, there goes 45 minutes of my life. I can't get it back, right? You can't get the time back. So that could bring on a sense of melancholy for you, or a sense of depression. Or, alternatively, it could sharpen your focus. What should I do with this brief time that I'm allotted here on earth? I think, we're in chapter 9 of Ecclesiastes today, I think Betty's the only one who said, hey, I really like this series. And I get it. If Ecclesiastes is tough to work through, because we can sum it up like this. Life is tough and then you die. That's all Solomon has said, right? You've been tracking with me. Life is hard. It doesn't get easy. It's full of uncertainties. There's no guarantees. And it gets worse than that. Because we're sold in this idea, if you do everything right, and you do it for the right reasons, and you do it the right way, you're going to be rewarded. Solomon says, that's really not how life falls out, you know? It doesn't always work out that you do the right thing for the right reasons and you receive the right reward. It doesn't work out that way. Where's the motivation? Where's the encouragement? Solomon says, even in the midst of all of this, God is ultimately in control. So, verse 1 of chapter 9, he says, but I laid all of this to heart. And what's he talking about? He's comparing how he wrapped up chapter 8. Verse 16 of chapter 8, when I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that's done on earth, how neither day nor night as once I sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that's done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he'll never find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find out what it is that God does and why he does it. Who can really understand? So, I laid all this to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God, whether it is love or hate. Man does not know, both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same events happen to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, the clean, the unclean, him who sacrifices, him who does not. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears also he who shuns it. This is evil, he says. Why is it that good people and bad people still have the same set of overall, broadly speaking, experiences? Lots of contrasts, lots of contradictions, lots of difficulties with the uncertainties. Heart, in the Hebrew language, the word is lev. And it can be the seat of emotions. It can be where wisdom is lodged. In the thinking of the Hebrew people. It's where wisdom dwells in the heart of the individual. And most words, it depends on the context of the sentence and the paragraph. Yes, it can be the organ that pumps blood through your body. But oftentimes the biblical metaphor that's employed is, this is the self. This is the seat of emotions. This is where the will is. I laid all this to heart. I'm trying to use all the wisdom, all the knowledge, all the life experience to understand it. I examine it. I'm looking at it thoroughly. It doesn't matter if you're righteous. It doesn't matter if you're wise. All of these things, it just doesn't seem to measure up. It doesn't seem wise. The wise. Again, another interesting Hebrew word here. It's chaham. This idea of intelligence, prudence, this idea of wisdom. Most oftentimes, the word is used to show that someone is skilled or proficient. So Solomon's saying, I'm using all of the experience and wisdom, all that I can do to try to hash this out, and it just doesn't seem to happen. Because life is so unpredictable. Talis, you were probably having a great day when that ladder slid off the wall. When you got up that morning before you broke your ankle and ruined your chances of ever playing ball again, what was it like the morning before? It was a beautiful day. My buddy Frank, you guys know the one who broke both his legs in our house a couple of years ago. He says when he's teaching his fall protection class, that what people don't realize is right before you fall, you don't realize it's going to happen. Well, Preston, you teach safety, right? You teach a fall protection class? Yeah. And so right before someone falls, they don't realize it. When we are walking on scaffolding, when we're pouring a wall, and you're up like 20 feet on the scaffolding, and they overlap those buckboards. I'm not talking about the real scaffolding like they use out of Eastern, the metal poles, but the fabricated stuff. And you walk from one 2x12 to the next, when you step down, you feel like you're falling. And you know what we call that? The inch and a half heart attack, right? Right? You don't know. It's unpredictable. It's uncertainty. And the entire spectrum of humanity, from those who voluntarily make an oath to God to those who shun making oaths, those who are obedient to those who are disobedient, and everyone in between, Solomon says, guess what? It's unfair. Look at verse 3. This is an evil in all that's done under the sun. And anytime he says under the sun, he's talking about the earthly realm compared to a supernatural, spiritual reality, right? This is evil. This is his opinion. Everything that's done, it seems unfair. It isn't proper. Let's pause this for just a moment. I find this an interesting side note to studying Scripture. I'm going to assume most of us in the room believe that Scripture is inspired by God, right? The Holy Spirit inspires these authors. Isn't it interesting that the character, the personality, the cynicism, the skepticism still is transparent? Yes, God is inspiring, but it's not divine dictation. Solomon, I want you to rewrite that paragraph, scratch that, do it like this. God inspires him, and he writes it through his own real life experience. And for him to say, this is evil. God is in control, but look at, to me, this is evil. My opinion, the way things play out, the way it shakes out, the righteous should be rewarded and the wicked should be punished every time. That's not how it's working out. And so the human element, it's almost humorous when you read what Solomon follows up with. It's an evil that's done, the same event happens. The hearts of children men are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to death. Everybody's insane. That's what he's saying. Madness is in their heart. When I look around, the inmates are running the asylum. Look at the craziness that's going on. This is horrible. How are we in control of anything like that? It's kind of funny because he was in control. Look at the wreck that Solomon ends up making in his life most of the time. So, everyone's crazy, they're all insane, and then they all die. It's like a horrible Shakespearean tragedy, right? They all die at the end. But he who is joined with the living has hope. A living God, right, is better than a dead lion. Now, this is a metaphor. The strongest insult that you could cast on your adversary in Solomon's day is to call him a dog. He's a dog. It's the vilest, corruptest, worst thing. But, what do we know about the lion? Right? Judah, the tribe of Judah. Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah. Lion represents boldness, braveness, strength, and nobility. So that's the greatest compliment. So the person who is the worst, vilest piece of trash and scum is better off than the guy who did everything right but is dead. Why? Why does someone say that? Do you think that's kind of interesting? Well, he says in verse 5, because the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love, verse 6, their hate, their envy, all of the human dynamics of experiences and everything that goes through have already perished, and forever they have no more share in what is done under even if you're on death row, you're in better shape than the guy who is already dead. This is life while you had it. There's something to that for Solomon. With all of the uncertainties, with all of the disappointments, with all of the craziness and madness. And then look at how he concludes this idea. There's this cynical observation that takes place, right? Everything is done under the sun. So, verse 7, eat, drink, and be merry. That's what he's saying. Go eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be white, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Ratsah, this idea of approved in the Hebrew, is kind of an interesting way of saying things because everything so far seems pointless, right? Doesn't matter if you're wicked, doesn't matter if you follow obedient paths, doesn't matter, right? You're all going to experience the same thing. But this word approved, other places in the Bible is translated pleased with. So substitute that. Instead of saying that God has already approved what you do, God is pleased with your effort. God is pleased with what you're trying to do. It also can be translated as delighted in, fond of, in other places, favorable, satisfactory. And there are places in the Bible where it's translated as graciousness. But God is doing something. God is looking at something. God is watching the effort. And he wants you, and this isn't some television evangelist pie in the sky, but he wants you to enjoy it. Right? John 10:10. Jesus says, I came to give you life and life in abundance. God doesn't want you to be miserable. Guess who wants you to be miserable? The adversary, the devil. Thank you, Jonathan. He wants you to be miserable. Guess who makes you miserable? Yourself. I make myself miserable. I'm my worst enemy at times. I don't have to look at circumstances around me. It can be me. Solomon says, yes, life is unfair. Yes, life is unpredictable. Yes, there are uncertainties. But eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart. God is approving. Let your garments be white. Let not oil be lacking on your head, right? A sign of celebration in ancient times. They would wear white for festivals, for important events, and then they would put olive oil on their head as a sign of gladness. That's how you knew when someone in that culture was not happy. They wouldn't wear good clothes. They wouldn't anoint their head with oil, and it was a sign of, I'm in mourning, I'm in misery, I'm suffering, right? So go about, celebrate it, enjoy it. You know the Sunday school teacher that teaches about the book of Proverbs, and the little boy about Graham's age comes out of the classroom, and mom and dad says, well, what did you learn in Sunday school today? Solomon had 700 wives and 300 porcupines. 700 wives and 300 concubines, right? I guess he probably knew about relationships. Isn't it interesting how he concludes? Enjoy life with the wife whom you love. All the days of your vain, pointless, driftless life. But he has given you under the sun because that is your portion in life. And you need toil at which you toil under the sun. In the end, listen to me carefully, I'm going to try to wrap this up. In the end, if you go through life before you will commit or participate, you ask the question, what's in it for me? You're going to be perpetually unhappy and dissatisfied. That's the message here. What's in it for me? What's the reward? What do I get out of it? Solomon says, don't look for that. Enjoy, and this is hard, because we don't want to commit or participate unless there's something in there, right? This is hard for us. We're either trapped in our minds with the problems of our past, right? And we have a hard time getting past that, or we worry about things that are in the future, but we never live in the moment. We don't appreciate the moment at the time. Watching the sunset together, enjoying the meal that you cooked together, laughing in the moment. That's your portion. Well, Craig, if you're telling me that that's as good as it gets, I'm not telling you that. Solomon is. You can't let the past overcloud and shadow what's going on in the goodness of the moment. That's all the reward you get for all your piety and all your efforts and all the goodness, right? Where's my brown star or blue star or yellow star, whatever it is the teacher puts on that, right? You're going to tell me that when I serve God in righteousness, I'm not promised a utopia? A pain-free existence? Or immunity from all the struggles and all the things? It doesn't work, according to Solomon, it doesn't work out that way. There is no pain-free existence. There is no immunity from all of, you fill in the blank that's in the world around us. So Solomon says, enjoy. This is your portion to enjoy. It's translated elsewhere in the Bible as to feel, to experience, to ascertain, to be aware of. But we struggle with the word joy. Enjoy it. Soak it up. Make the memories. Cook the meals together. Eat the food together. Wash the dishes together. Love unconditionally. Savor the moment. That's what Solomon is saying. That's the reward. That's the portion. That's, if possible, that's how we avoid the cynicism. That's how we find satisfaction. Since the reality is, life is short.